Thank you. Good morning and welcome to this Festival of Climate Innovation and Climate Services. We are extremely happy that you have decided to join us. We have gathered this community of people around climate services to discuss the recent advancement in the field, what has been achieved, and then also interact among ourselves, one another, to speak about the challenges, to find out the solutions to those challenges, to learn about many, many other initiatives that in the meantime started and are extremely interesting for this community. So I think last time when we met in person, it was more than 5 years ago, organized by Climate Europe 1, the first predecessor of our project. Climate Europe 2 took over. We are organizing every 6 months web festivals, virtual festivals of climate knowledge, innovation, and services to keep this community alive and extend this community. We really need a lot of insight from climate knowledge. We need to bring this knowledge into practice. And this is why you come from different sectors. Most of you come from public authorities and agencies working on the mission adaptation we will hear about in the afternoon session, or the regional or national Met offices, or city council and so on. So this is the right place for you to be, to learn about the state-of-the-art development in how to make climate knowledge, how to harness the climate knowledge for a better planning of adaptation, resilience building, and climate action. This is not a scientific conference, right? So we will have keynotes, speeches, so we will have also a pitch presentation, but most of the things will happen outside on the marketplace and in the World Cafe here. So we hope there will be a lot of interactions and a lot of interesting things to tell and to learn about. So this is different from typical scientific or research dominated gathering. You will also find all information and the background document on your badge. If you turn it around, you will find a QR code. You can access the presentations, you can watch them, download, use them. You will see also the agenda, how it evolves. You will find also a list of the speakers and later on also participants. We have more than 60 speakers after keynotes, speeches, pitch presentation, and World Cafe moderators. There are many more people standing outside in the marketplace. So this is really a unique opportunity for you to interact with the members of the communities. And of course, the overarching themes of our festival are question related: how to make climate services useful, used, usable, and how to ensure that they are quality assured, that they contribute, that fulfill their scope, and not at least how we can make provision of climate services more transparent. And transparency and quality assurance is achieved by standardization. So you will also learn about what Climate Europe 2 project is doing in order to foster the standardization of climate services. So this is my short introduction. Thank you again for joining us. I would now like to invite our first three keynote speakers, and that's Carlo, Paco, and Carlo. Please join me on the table. So we have picked up three speeches that will introduce the stage, the topic that we will be discussing over the next days. If it looks like male-dominated panel, wait for the second part of it. We will have a female-dominated panel in the second round. We will have also some online speaker for the second panel, but I will introduce them in a second. So our first speaker is Carlo Cacciamani. Carlo Cacciamani is the head of the newly established Italian Met Office, Italia Meta. But he is he has a very rich experience also serving as the head of the situational room at the Civil Protection Department in Rome, and before leading the regional climate office in Emilia-Romagna. And Carlo has prepared for us some thoughts about what does it mean to run the newly established Met Office agency. What are the climate services that Italy is prepared to deliver, and what are the challenges, how they can be solved. Carlo, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for the invitation, Yaro. It is very a pleasure for me to be here. And I have prepared also some, okay, that's fantastic, organization, you say. So I will speak about just 5-6 minutes, no more, about what is the situation in Italy concerning climate services availability, and what is the role that the Italian Meteo Agency can have in order to coordinating most of these activities that are already present in our country. Just one word, what is climate services? I don't think that I have to repeat you what is climate services, but just is the provision, the use of climate data, information, knowledge to assist decision-making in climate-sensitive sectors to help society understand and respond to manage climate variability and change. That is became more and more important, relevant is the availability of climate services to make effort to give efforts to different sectors, agriculture, energy production, transportation, civil protection, and so on. In fact, we see that in Italy, we are working in that. You see here the application fields are urban and spatial planning, civil protection, land water ecosystem, population health, transportation, infrastructures, energy production, cultural heritage, and tourism, finance, and insurance. So you see that there are a sort of list of sectors where there are a lot of stakeholders working inside to create the services. What is the situation in Italy? The operational activity in Italy is that we have defined a sort of recognition 4 years ago in a document that was be done in the Copernicus User Forum environment. And you see here, there is the document, this description of available climate services we have in Italy, that we made a recognition more than 80 services in the different sectors that can be divided in different aspects: data monitoring services, climate bulletins, and extended range prediction, monthly, seasonal, and the climate projections. I don't have time to show some examples for reason of time that could be matter of discussion during this meeting. But just to give you some example, for example, we have to give an answer concerning the exceptional warm that we had in 2002 summer, for example, the hydrological water budget and the renewable water resource. So the idea is to collect data, information, data coming from different data sources, satellite information, radar information, a long time series of information in order to put together and create project and services for specific sectors, like, for example, for agriculture, for irrigation purposes, and so on. Many public, what is the status of the art? Do we have many public and private institutions producing climate services? We have a major problem. The major problem we have is there is a weak coordination, there is a sort of duplication of effort, sometimes there is fragmentation among all these actors that are working in this field. So we need to make a coordination or to produce and delivering these climate services, developing new ones at a national level, but also at the regional level. It's also at the different level of amplitude of the territory, and overcoming the fragmentation. That this is really a major problem we have. One possibility is to use Italian Meteo Agency. Italian Meteo Agency has been defined in 2017 by national law, and the major effort is to coordinate, first of all, to increase the efficiency of the Italian meteorological system. The Italian meteorological system is composed by a sort of very broad amount of institutions working at the national level and working at the regional level and also at the other levels. But there is the need to coordinate, to put together all of these. Otherwise, we have some of non-homogeneous information and services, sometimes created many there one times in the different locations that without any type of coordination so far. So we have to coordinate, Italiametro has to coordinate, connect what already exists many times in terms of operational climate services developing. And in order also to capitalize the results in order not to duplicate efforts and so on. That's it. I don't want to use more time than that, as I promised 5 minutes, and more or less that I use 5 minutes. So I think that there is room for discussion after that.
Thank you very much, Carlo. So we will give the first opportunity to all keynote speakers to give the initial statement, and then we will open the discussion regarding all three short talks. So you might prepare your question, and also the online audience, I would like to welcome you and invite you to post your question in the Q&R system of the Zoom. The next speaker doesn't need an introduction. It's Francisco Doblas Reyes, who is the head of the Department of Earth Sciences at the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, and he's also coordinator of this project. So Paco, I would like to invite you to tell us a little bit more about the Climate Europe 2 project and how you see it, but especially also about what's going on in the Destination Earth initiative in Europe.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Yaro. I don't want to start any speech or anything without thanking first the colleagues at CMCC who have been really working very hard to make this possible, and also to the program committee that has been working along with CMCC to organize the agenda and the activities and the many things that will be happening in this 2.5 days. So great that you really put all this effort into this. I'm going to speak here with 2 different hats. One as coordinator of the Climate Europe 2 project, which is the one that is promoting this event here. And the other one is with the hat of someone who participates in some of the activities in the Destination Earth program funded by the European Commission. Concerning Climate Europe 2, you'll see these kind of slides in the coming days presented by several of us. The Climate Europe 2 project is a Horizon Europe project. It's a coordination support action. So somehow it's not supposed to do research per se, but to coordinate and promote and create a network of projects and activities that talk together about the 3 main objectives of the project. The 3 main objectives of Climate Europe 2 are, the first one is the produce a set of recommendations for the standardization of climate services. This is easier said than done. It's quite a massive challenge, and the really interesting thing is that it's really moving forward, and it's moving forward quickly thanks to the work of the people in the project. The second activity, the second objective in the project is to support the communities, to make sure that in events like this one, and as Yaro explained before, this is one out of many, we have representation of the different actors that are relevant in the community of climate services in Europe. One of the key words for this project is equity. We fail continuously in making the activities of the project equitable, but at least we have colleagues that remind us how important it is, that are pointing their finger at the things that are failing, and that we are trying to really make our best to keep learning and to really make this equitable and bring in all those actors that usually are not part of the mainly academic arena that is represented here, but that have a lot to say when it comes to the standardization of the climate services. And the third one is to increase the uptake of climate services. As Carlos said, there are lots of things that are happening. They are in the field of climate services. Climate services is only part of a much bigger decision-making process that is very different in the different sectors. And it's something that will require a lot of effort, first to identify who those actors are. Second, to really make sure that information that is being generated in Climate Europe 2 and in other initiatives reaches them. And the third one is to offer them an arena, a platform for them to interact with each other. It's quite a lot of work that is being done in Climate Europe 2. The project has been going on now for 18 months, and there are 3 more years to go. So, as you will see, many of these things will depend on the input that we are getting from, especially those that are outside Climate Europe 2. We are here to learn and to take stock from all those that are involved in climate services and that have something to say so that they can be included in the recommendations for the standardization. With my second hat, now talking about Destination Earth, which is, it will be very brief what I'm going to say here. Destination Earth is an initiative funded by the European Commission, is managed by DG Connect, one of the Directorate Generals of the Commission. And it's an initiative that tries to develop digital twins of the Earth for the different components that are relevant for decision-making, especially for policy, but also for many other applications of environmental information. Among those digital twins, there is one that tries to develop a digital twin for climate adaptation. And this digital twin is, the goal of that digital twin, which is supported by a contract managed by ECMWF, is to develop a new way of elements that can produce unprecedented climate information. It doesn't have climate services per se included in its objectives, but it has lots of elements and lots of ambition in the sense that it can really change some of the contributions that come into climate services. Of course, this comes along with many other contributions that are fundamental to develop climate information that is the underpinning the climate services that we are talking about here, that is developed in context and that is actually delivered in a way that leads to action. So this digital twin, in particular, is coming with some interesting features that hopefully can really make a splash in the climate services field. The first one is the idea of the operationalization of climate projections. So it intends to create an infrastructure. So it creates that software that is running on the largest computers in Europe that aims at producing climate projections at the global scale with the highest resolution that we can produce at this stage. Right now, we are running global models at 5 kilometers, and that can be run on demand, so that if there are new requirements, new questions coming up from policymakers, we can produce new simulations and deliver this data using a concept called streaming, which is no different to the streaming approaches that are being used by Spotify or YouTube. The idea is to offer the data that underpins the generation of climate information on a continuous basis and as on demand as it can be done. And there are lots of developments that are somehow making this a very technological push, but that are taking into account the lessons that we have learned from the many projects, many activities, C3S, that we know can really make a difference for a number of users of the climate information. So somehow this doesn't solve the problem of climate services. It's only one step forward. And it comes along with the humbleness of trying to learn what are the requirements that this technological push can support and learn from. And that's everything that I wanted to say. Sorry, I didn't want to finish without this last GIF there. So in this contract, along the lines of what I said before, of really going a step forwards, getting closer to the delivery of the climate new sets of climate information that Destination Earth can produce. For instance, we are leveraging all the knowledge that is being produced by large language models and producing things like chatbots that can answer questions about climate adaptation. This is only a very preliminary example called ClimSites, and there is a lot more that can be done that can use the much better data that is being produced by these simulations, much better observations that are being obtained from Copernicus, for instance, and many other elements, knowledge in particular, that can be embedded in these large language models to produce another piece of information that, with the adequate support from humans, can really make a difference in climate services. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paco. I think there will be many questions, and this is absolutely something that we want to learn more about Destination Earth and what kind of facilities they will provide for the climate services developers. But there's another area of exciting development. I'm very pleased to introduce Carlo Bontempo, who is the head of Copernicus Climate Change Service. And Carlo kindly agreed to take us through the recent development of C3S and especially the interactive atlas, I believe. Is it? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jaro. And thank you, everyone, for the organization here. It's fantastic to be here with you. And it's also nice because I think in the previous web festival, I was online. And so it's the way to show everyone that I also have legs and I can stand up, which is great. Jokes aside, it's really a pleasure to be here with you and discuss a bit of what has happened. Last time we spoke, I think I mentioned the trilemma, the idea that climate services, you cannot do a climate service that is generic and serves the need of specific decision maker at the same time as being effective. Today, I will go a bit deeper in what has happened in C3S over the last few months and try to reflect on those. I have 10 minutes and I have plenty of slides. Really exciting things have happened. So please, Jaro, bear with me. And if I'm overrunning, give me a nod. The first point I want to make is that in order to work, it needs to be topical, what we provide as climate service. And it needs to be based on what's happening at the ecosystem level, if you want. So this is an example. 2023 has been exceptional from a climate point of view in so many ways. Possibly one of the ways in which this was exceptional was the dramatic loss of sea ice around Antarctica. Having product able to provide up-to-date information about that loss is an asset. And this is something that is possible also because of the investment that went into Mercator, went into ESA, EUMETSAT. So it's not something that you do unilaterally, but it's something that actually builds on the collective effort. The second point is, in terms of climate services, is about, and Paco was referring to it when talking about Destination Earth, is the idea of continuous production. It's not that you do a piece of research somewhere, you put it on a shelf, and that stays there forever. It's something that feeds back and influences the design of the following cycle, of the following set of simulation. And this is an example. This is the next few cycle of the weather model at the CNWF, the IFS, and where you see, oops, I didn't know there was one, where you see the different cycle representing different things. And there is one specific cycle that is 49R1 that will start integration early next year, which will underpin the next generation of reanalysis. But this is not a one-off. It's part of a continuous cycle where we learn how the model is behaving and put it into production. And I guess as a climate service provider and climate information generator, reflecting on that point of view, reflecting on the fact that this cannot be one-off, but it needs to be part of a production system is very important. The third point is to be useful to users. And this is an example, a specific example from DGENV. DGENV, there is a specific directive in DGENV looking at the pollution, national emissions of certain atmospheric pollutants. And there are some exceptions. Countries are allowed to exceed their threshold in case of particularly cold weather or during winter, or in case of particularly dry summer in summer. And what the Commission, in particular, DGN, was after was information that was of sufficient quality, but also constant across the continent to provide a measurable way of assessing whether the threshold was exceeded or not. And there is an interface directly to the data coming from Copernicus Climate Change Service that serves this directive. So these were three elements that I think are important. Clearly, our most visible output is the State of the Climate Report. This is the version of last year. This year, we will do the State of the Climate Report for Europe jointly with WMO, and there will be much more on the impact. That is a part that the National Met Services and the WMO Region 6 worked very much on. But if you look at these climate monitoring and climate services output, possibly one of the most striking feature that we put together in the last few months is the climate pulse. So climate pulse is a way of looking at the anomalies and the temperature at the moment, air temperature and sea temperature, up until very recently. So with a latency of a few days. And this actually, we developed this interface mostly for our own benefit, because every time we put out one of the monthly bulletin, we are flooded with requests from the press, and more often than not, press ask us to have the data behind the plot, to have a nice plot in PNG or PDF, and this was done manually, making a bit of a hard work for us. Now there is an interactive interface where anyone can look at the data and download the data. Here's one of the development, and the one maybe you will see another day. Can you go to the next, please? Well, these are just a few examples also on the mobile on that interface. Okay. Yeah, great. The other element is the EU climate risk assessment. Probably you heard that today the first EU climate risk assessment was made available, made public. This will be presented to Parliament on Wednesday, an initiative led by CMCC with a significant contribution from BSC, and EEA was at the driving seat of it. And for me, and we play a very minor role in it, but this exercise represent a step forward in the way in which we analyze climate risk, in general, in the way in which we look at climate at European level. So in thinking in terms of transformation of climate services, this setup whereby we try to understand what are the worries of the policymaker, what is really, what are the key elements on the horizon, and understand which one of those actually we are not accounting for in our modeling becomes very, very important. Never mind, I can do without. Is it? Right, okay. Well, we can go rapidly, because one of the elements of climate services is really looking forward. It's not just looking about the past. And I guess one of the big features of the last year has been the strong El Nino, not extreme, but strong El Nino that characterized the climate of the planet. And we are now in a transition period. Most systems actually are suggesting neutral condition by the end of the spring, a transition towards La Nina. And this again is relevant. Having this information readily available for anyone to scrutinize is key to answer questions such as 2024 will beat 2023 global mean temperature. And I know BSC and the Met Office have done a lot in that space already. But it's also important to have information about the teleconnection. A lot of the teleconnection about El Nino are still based on North American data and are not kept up to date when new data comes in. So having a traceable way of looking at teleconnection and the impact on the ground is important. And this is picked up by the community. All these visualizations that are here are not made by ECNWF, actually are made by third parties and represent way of showing the seasonal prediction information. The other point that Yara was alluding to is the development of the atlas. So as you're certainly familiar with, IPCC released in the Era 6 the interactive atlas, intergalactic climate atlas. Because of the IPCC process, the atlas needed to be frozen in time, so there was no possibility of adding new data or new functionalities to the atlas. But we picked up from there and added new data and new functionalities, and the atlas are now available and fully interactive. I don't know if you can click to make the animation flow, maybe. Yeah, thank you. So you can basically select the region you like, whether it is a nation, where is a UCRA region, where is an IPCC region, or you can define your own domain and extract information for all the variable you may be interested in, as you see, and retrieve the information in near real time. The change in the interface actually makes a significant difference for the user. So this has been an instant hit on our web pages and account for a significant fraction of the traffic we have now. We have, excuse me, we have implemented as a geographical aggregation, nations, UCRA regions, and IPCC regions, but there is no limit to what can be done, and potentially thinking in terms of the mission on adaptation or other local administration, this can be added in the future. And there is already a plan, a future for the Atlas this summer to add new functionalities and a new data set. This is not living on its own, as I was mentioning at the beginning. It's all about interaction with other entities, with other interfaces. A very active one is with the European Environment Agency, where the Climate Adapt portal and the European Climate Data Explorer are effectively powered up by the data coming from Copernicus, and you see an example. Another example of that is what we are doing with ENSOE. ENSOE is the European organization for the transmission system operators, basically the grid connecting the country, the electricity in Europe. And they are looking at the future. They are looking at the way the climate will affect their investment. And in the new edition of their data set, the edition is directly based on the information coming from Copernicus. Another really exciting prospect is with the European Investment Bank, that actually branded itself as the EU Climate Bank. And because of the taxonomy, because of the task force on climate-related financial disclosure, there is a renewed interest in understanding how climate change can affect investment. And we are working very closely with them in developing that interface, something that actually will benefit directly from further standardization in terms of climate services. What is coming up next? And 3 slides and I stop. Yaro, I promised. I know I'm possibly a bit long. One is about attribution. Attribution is fundamentally something that we are asked about every single day, possibly. There is an invitation to Denter coming out relatively soon to add information on attribution to our climate monitoring pages. Other 2 things that are happening that are quite exciting. One is a fundamental reshape of the climate data store. The climate data store is the central piece of our architecture where most of the data sits. We are transforming it and making it even more robust. We are already serving 300,000 users, roughly, to whom we deliver some 200 terabytes of data per day. We are powering it up to ensure that this can keep growing and can keep interacting with initiatives such as Destination Earth or WCAO more seamlessly. And finally, I close to this one, which is equally important because it's really the handshaking between what's happening at the European level within Copernicus and what's happening at the national level. So we have launched a national collaboration program. This national collaboration program aims to fund activities that support the handshaking so that the information that is made available through Copernicus can then feed into national priorities and national decision-making. And I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was incredibly rich set of presentations and insight, number of products that you might look into. We will open now for a question from in-person audience, and later on we will take questions from the online audience. So if you have a question to our distinguished panelists, please raise your hand. Somebody would like to break the ice? Yes, Philip, right on. Right, and the microphone is coming.
Thank you. Philippe Dulkens from the European Commission. The question is to Paco. So the users case will be released soon for Destination Earth. If I understand well, the two pilots are in the area of one adaptation to climate change, the other one on extreme weather events. I would like to know whether the use case will be selected amongst the participants to the EU mission on adaptation or not.
Now it works. As far as I know, no. So right now the launch is due to happen in Finland in June, and the use cases that are part of the contracts that I'm aware of, both funded by EUMETSAT, by ESA, and by ECMWF, the mission is not dealt with explicitly. That's, as far as I know, the current situation. In the second phase, there should be new tenders opened, and those tenders are, as far as I know, not written yet, or not all of them. So there is an opportunity there to really make sure that there is a link between those in charge of Destination Earth, in particular DG Connect and the mission. But so far, the awareness is far from perfect.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. More questions from the audience? Yes, Harry Laus.
Harry Laus from the Climate Data Factory for Paco as well on the digital twin. We have seen the wealth of information coming from C3S, and C3S not only produces data, but also has a lot of initiatives to make sure that the data is used. What is happening with the digital twin in terms of efforts that all this new huge amount of data is actually usable and reaches end users?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's very good that Carlo is here, because then we can really, you're pointing the finger where it hurts, as Philippe did right now. So the one of the differences between C3S and the climate digital twin in Destination Earth is that the climate digital twin is focusing at operationalizing the formulation of climate projections from a very technological perspective. While C3S is very much focusing on serving a number of users that is very varied, that is growing by the day, and that have been already identified, and whose requirements have been already classified in a way that makes the problem tractable. In my opinion, and now it's my opinion, I think they are perfectly complementary. So C3S can be a perfect channel for Destination Earth to reach a number of users that is incredibly beyond reach of what DG Connect can do. And C3S will never be able to do what Destination Earth is trying to do with the huge technological push that is required for operationalizing climate projections. So climate projections so far have been dealt with using the research community, actually abusing of the research community, and that has to stop. And Destination Earth is the pioneering effort from Europe to demonstrate that this is possible.
Thank you, Paco. I think Carlo wants to add to your replies as well.
So C3S will be the channel.
Yeah.
I guess it's an evolving ecosystem, right? And I can only second what Paco just said. There are things that we cannot do at this stage that we know will be useful, and Destination Earth is developing. And the fact that Irina, Sandu, and myself basically share a corridor in Bonn where we are makes the connection between Destination Earth, ECMWF, and C3S extremely closer. And that's true for the development, but it's also true for the use cases. So the fact that, as Paco was saying, that Destination Earth can build upon the experience of C3S in terms of use cases, I think is helping massively. And we do expect the next generation of climate services, whether this will be Copernicus 3 or later, I don't know, but the future generation of climate service to be based on the technology that Destination Earth is developing. That's for me very important. Also because one side, I mean, we spoke many times, so you know my point of view about the operationalization of or the need for operationalization of climate projections. One side is entirely technological and is really what Destination Earth is working on. It's not the only part that needs to be operationalized of that equation, but it's an important component. So the fact that Destination Earth is taking care of that, and I was showing the cycle of the IFS for reanalysis as an example of that operational approach to generation of information. That's great. It's great that Destination Earth is there.
Yeah, can I have a follow-up to Carlo? So we have now this Destination Earth, which is the cutting edge advanced climate simulation for the whole globe and Europe. Then we have Copernicus Climate Change Service that is elaborating more on the climate services and serves as the gate for the different users. And you, in your talk, you have highlighted the national coordination, the importance of national coordination and efficiency, improving the delivery to the last mile, right? Would you like to elaborate a little bit on that? Is it correct? It might be that I'm just presenting this value chain from Destination Earth, Copernicus to the national metaphysics.
Okay. I think that is necessary to fill the gap among different scales. So we needed to arrive to the local scale because the needs of the users in many cases are really at the local scale working. So in different sectors, for example, in civil protection, early warning system optimization, that is one side. And the other side is the optimization of agriculture practices. And we have to arrive just at the level of a single farmer sometimes. So in order to fill this gap, it is necessary to make a sort of downscaling in some sense. So we need really a digital twin approach, also arriving at the local scale, putting together, for example, the hazard in the case of early warning, for example, we have to put together the hazards evaluation coming from the modeling, for example, from numerical modeling with the vulnerability of and with the exposition of the territory. And so we have to produce also, I say, a sort of a modeling of these other aspects in order to arrive to the population, in order also to give information to the users about what is the possibilities to increase the effect of the reducing risk action using this type of technologies. So that is, I think, the effort that we have to work together with working with the Copernicus and with digital twins, same approach, because we have to arrive to the local scale. That is essentially the point.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So Andreas, I have one. I can take one more question. So 2 questions, and then we will get the floor. 3 questions. We take them at once, and then we turn to the online audience. So Andreas.
Okay, yeah. The first question is more a question to the audience, because I'm just keen to know who of you, because we want to talk to users here today, who is using C3S services or has used these services in the past. Is there anyone here in the audience who's user of this? Okay, that's great. So, and the second or follow-on questions, perhaps to Carlo or the 2 Carlos, how do you ensure that you reach your envisaged users audience with your products? How do you do this?
Okay, so we take 2 more questions. Prepare for your answers. We have 1 question, Antonella, and then back in the room.
Good morning, Antonella Morgillo. And maybe this is a weird question because I didn't work on with the digital twin, and I use sometimes Copernicus. But essentially, the differences between the 2 is that the digital twin produces the impacts of the climate change on the environment or the society, and Copernicus delivered all the data needed to produce this impact. Is correct? Not. It's a weird question. This is my.
Excellent. So let's take the third question, and then we give the floor to our distinguished panelists, and then we will look into questions from the online audience.
Hello, everyone, and thanks to the three speakers for the insightful presentations. My question goes to Paco. It's an understanding question. You mentioned, by talking about the digital twin for adaptation, that there would be emphasis put on increasing interactivity so that variables and simulations can be produced on demand, if I understood correctly. I'm just wondering, how does the process look like, and what kind of data, what kind of information will be produced that will not already be there? Is that like higher resolution based on simulations forced by boundary conditions from coarser scale resolution? How do you include new variables? Does that need model development, or are these variables that were here but not available on the tool? Yeah, I just have a lot of questions on how that works actually and concretely.
Thank you very much. So we have three questions. The first one is about, are we sure that we will deliver the services to the final user? The second one, is Destination Earth meant to produce more the impact side or perhaps operational side? And then third question is something like how it works. What is the added value of Destination Earth or digital twin compared to the pre-prepared data set that are already available? So I take it from Paco, then both Carlos afterwards, if they want to add anything.
Yeah, I will start with the last question. So right now we are running three different models, three different global models at 5 kilometer resolution in the atmosphere, 10 kilometers in the ocean. So this is just to give you an idea in CMIP. So the standard way of producing climate projections, the models tend to have resolutions that vary between 50 kilometers and 200 kilometers. So that means that we are handling really demanding experiments to produce the data. This is an anecdote. This is not important. It will be important only for one thing, but it makes nice pictures, but that doesn't guarantee anything. So what we do is we output everything. Every single variable that the models can produce, we make it available in the supercomputer. So on an hourly frequency. So usually when you go to the CMIP and Cordex databases, you have data sets that are available at the native resolution. In Cordex, it varies between 5 and 50 kilometers. In CMIP with a different, much lower resolution. But you have a certain number of variables, not everything, and you have them with a time frequency that at best is 3 hourly. So we are now, so going back to where the way we are running, so the climate models are running at very high resolution. They are making all the variables available on an hourly frequency. So we are producing around between 60 and 80 terabytes of output per day, depending on how quickly the models run. We cannot store this data forever, but we make this data available to anyone who can make use of it. So it could be a regional model that is running in parallel with the climate models. It could be to compute indicators that require high frequency data, like for instance, the wind power generation sector. They're interested in very high frequency data from the observations and the models themselves. And another interesting factor is that we make all this data available using the same grid, the same metadata, and in exactly the same place immediately as the model runs. So you can monitor what the models are doing and extract the data as the data are being produced. You can provide feedback to the modeler, say there is something wrong here. You can use the data already as the data comes towards you. After a few days or after a couple of weeks of the data being available on the supercomputer, then a subset of this data is stored for the long term in the same way as CMIP and Cordex are doing, okay? So one of the big differences is that you have access to the data immediately. you have access to data that never anyone could access from a model. And you have all this data in the same place with exactly the same grid, which makes life a bit easier for, in particular, when one wants to compute indicators. So this is one of the differences between the way we are trying to do things and develop things in Destination Earth in the traditional way. This has sure. This has implications for users, and we can go back to this and on a one-to-one discussion. But somehow the idea is to really break a bit this barrier that often the users had of not being able to have a saying in what the models are producing. We give them everything, and we help them to use it.
Brilliant, thank you. And Carlos, would you like to give any answer to the questions on, especially the usability? How we ensure that those whole application are eventually reaching the users?
So the point is how to make the delivering of the data. So I say this is a major point. So first of all, I think that we needed to understand very, very well what is the needs of the users and what type of products they need. Otherwise, we have a tremendous amount of data, as you have seen, but we have to understand what is needed in detail in order to create products that are good for them. Otherwise, maybe the problem that this amount of data is not usefully used. That is a pity for that, concerning to the big amount of effort that has been done to produce of this or that. So first of all, so we have to communicate with users and to understand the points. And we have to sort of to increase, to create a bridge among the different users and the producers of the data. This is the second point is the digital twin versus, I think, okay, there is the other Carlo that is much better than me can say that. But my feeling is that digital twin is devoted to create different scenarios of hazards in some sense, but also, for example, thinking to the risk that can be done in the different sectors to create in advance different scenario of risk in order to facilitate decision to the decision maker that he can that in this direction, in the other direction, and he knows in advance what is the results, of course, in a digital Earth, not in the real Earth. But this is what I think it is the point. On the other side, the climate services, the needs to create services, selected services, starting from the big amount of the raw data that can be created by the different modeling chains. That is, I don't know if you agree with the other.
Carlo, any last word to wrap up this round of questions?
Sure, plenty. Well, no, the first one, starting with the first question, well, we do monitor who's using the data, and we do know how they're using the data to some extent. I mean, clearly, what they do, their premises, we don't know, but if not else, we maintain an up-to-date register on which parameter are being downloaded, which application have been triggered, and so on. And having a sample of 300,000 registered users, we have somehow an understanding of how the data is being used. Clearly, there is also a posteriori analysis where you look at reference back to C3S or stuff like that in peer-reviewed literature, in regulation or legislation. So we have a way of monitoring ex post how the data was used. The other element is that we collect systematically the user requirement, either when they are produced as an activity looking at user requirement, but also in response to user queries. So we have one of the elements that I think is important to stress when talking about operationalization is actually user support. The fact that there is a hot desk ready to answer a question and to keep track of what is being asked and why is fundamental for us and is an engine for innovation. So I guess those are the main mechanisms. On the other two questions, well, fundamentally, I do think that Destination Earth, I know, is a bit abused as a word, but it's really a disruptive technology. It's changing the way in which climate information is generated, and this leads to potentially a new way of interacting with climate data. So there is the side that Paco was mentioning about streaming the data, about generating the output. But for me, there is also another angle that is the potentially interactive nature of simulation. So in the interface between decision makers and climate modeling, the possibility of asking the what if question. What if I decide to plant 1 billion trees in this region? What will happen to the climate? I'm not saying that this is the full answer, what Destination Earth is doing with the digital twin, but is adding a capability that we didn't have. And similarly, I mean, if you look at the simulations that we have now in CIMIP, and take reference to what has happened a couple of years ago with the eruption of Hunga-Tonga, right? Well, Hunga-Tonga is nowhere to be seen in any of the simulation, and we couldn't do anything else. We still live with those simulations. And for the next few years, Hunga-Tonga plays a role. So having the possibility of reacting to things happening and producing the climate projection in an operational fashion, as we do weather prediction, I think is a fundamental step change or evolution of the landscape.
Brilliant. No,
happy to discuss offline.
Nice wrapping up this panel. Please join me in thanking our distinguished panelists for great words. Thank you. So this first part of the panel is over, but we will continue with second panel. Our distinguished speakers, I would call them CFC, Carlo, Francisco, and Carlo, are staying with us for the rest of the day. Please use that opportunity. There was a wealth of information that they gave through their presentation. You might talk to them during the coffee break and ask for more information. So now I would like to turn to our second, and this is a female panel, and it's VDA. It's Veronica, Daniela, and Asun. It's completely female panel, but because Veronica and Daniela are going to join us online, I would first invite Veronica. Veronica Grasso is with the World Meteorological Organization, WMO, and she is the lead editor of the global stake of climate services. So she will be able to pass over the information about all the processes behind collecting the information and producing the reports. Veronica, thank you very much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I will now open my slides. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in the festival and to give some insights on the state of climate services as emerging from the flagship report of WMO that has been producing since 2019 together with key partners. And here I would like to really thank the partners who have contributed throughout the years to this report, including some present today, for example, BSC and ECMWF. We have also key partners, which are the major climate finance institutions. So you see their logos here shown on the screenshot of the first page of last year's report. So I would like to invite you also to visit WMO library to find out more, because this was the 5th report. So I wanted to start with setting a little bit the scene, and I'm taking a graph, a map from the last IPCC report that shows really that climate change impacts are not experienced equally across regions and even within countries. This map shows the observed human vulnerability to climate change, and it's really a key risk factor that differs globally. So IPCC projects with high confidence that future health risks of injury, disease, and death that are a result of more intense heat waves and fires, food and waterborne diseases are likely to increase. And in particular, 50% of future excess mortality from climate change by 2050 are projected to occur in Africa. So I wanted also to show a global overview that you will find online in the report available through WMO library that shows the climate services capacities of Met services throughout the world, you will see the different shades of the green going from basic, essential, full, and advanced, as well as some that are still in the category less than basic. So WMO monitors the capacities of Met services to provide both climate, weather, and water services functionality since many years now. And since 2018, we've seen a growth actually in the level of capacities when it comes to climate services delivery of Met services. So good news is that currently, as you see from the slide that is shown here, majority of the Met services are delivering climate services at an essential level, but nevertheless, as you see also, that 31% of Met services have either full or advanced capacity, and that's where really the tailored climate services happen, and as well as the co-production. So this really is it's a huge capacity gap that we see. So I wanted to show some statistics and some numbers that apply, for example, to the climate services for health. And so we see that there's an immense untapped potential to apply climate services to really ensure that socioeconomic benefits emerge from the application of climate services on the ground. But we see, for example, for the health sector, that 74% of Met services that are providing services to health provide raw climate data to the health sector. But on the other side of the coin, we see that only 23% of ministries of health use such information for their decision-making and for the health surveillance systems. We worked jointly with WHO and looked at both WMO as well as the World Health Organization data to extract such key findings. And this is mainly due because only less than 50% of Met services deliver tailored climate services for the health sector that are co-produced and really tailored to the health sector needs. This obviously needs to change for the health sector needs to be fully met. Good news is that the demand for climate services is huge. So we've analyzed the nationally determined contributions submitted by UNFCCC parties to date. And on the right side, you see a cloud graph that shows key terms that are extracted through the analysis of these documents, looking really at what parties are saying when it comes to their needs, when it comes to climate service, climate information products, forecasts. And you see that the highest mention really refers to tailored climate services. On the left side, maybe the graph is a bit small, but I will talk about it. So we've in particular looked at the adaptation component of the nationally determined contributions documents to identify which are the top priorities for parties when it comes to adaptation. You see that, for example, agriculture and food security and water emerged as top 1 and top 2, but we further looked at the climate services needs and mentions within those documents. So for example, 85% of the parties that highlight agriculture and food security as their top adaptation priority, they also mention climate services. So really the demand is out there and parties are asking for support. But where are the gaps and why this is not completely happening? I wanted to show the climate services value chain that for most of you might be obvious, but I wanted to point out to the fact that really the climate services to be effectively delivered and used by the users, all of the components need to work together in order for this to happen. So we have the going from left to right, the governance aspects, the basic system component that combines the observing networks, the data collection and management, monitoring and forecasting. Then we have the provision and application component. And finally, the monitoring and evaluation of socioeconomic benefits achieved on the ground. The user interface and capacity development are key components which are cross-cutting across the whole value chain. What we've seen by looking at the data from the WMO members is that going from left to right, the capacities actually decrease. And monitoring and evaluation is one aspect that emerges as a key gap across the years, as well as user interface. So finally, my last slide, wanted to point on the fact that co-production is really key, and it has emerged also from previous talks, as well as tailored products that actually allow for that better and more efficient delivery and use by the sectors and the user that actually need this type of products and services. And all of this through improved collaboration between Met services and sectors. And here I wanted to highlight one aspect and one concept that WMO promotes is the national frameworks for climate services, which are institutional mechanisms that allow for that collaboration to take place. And this allows for the user requirements to be collected, for the co-production and collaboration to happen, and also for the feedback to be collected by Met services and providers of such services. And then the feedback loop then closes through the improvement of such services. So I wanted to thank you very much, the organizers especially, and the whole consortium. And I leave you here for the next speech. Thank you. I will stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Veronica, both for your very interesting talk, but especially for what you are doing, systematically collecting, assessing the way how climate services are used around the globe. So I hope you are able to stay with us. There will be questions after we run through the statement of the whole panelists. As next, I would like to give the floor to Daniela Jakob. This is another person that doesn't need to be introduced. Daniela has been leading the German Climate Service Center for many years, and she's also the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Climate Services. And we have asked Daniela to reflect a little bit, because this is the anniversary, right? 15 years of JERICS. So reflect a little bit about how the situation have changed, what are the salient experiences from running a service center for the policymakers or any other field related to climate service. So Daniela, thank you very much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Yaro, and welcome and hello from Hamburg. I'm very pleased that I can be with you here. I will share my screen now. I'm sorry that I cannot be there in person, but I hope I will touch a few interesting thoughts for which you might discuss further on in the next days. So first of all, let me say, while we heard the talks of the first male panel, I changed my title. So, and you will understand this in a minute. So I changed the title from looking at plus minus 15 years, so climate services. And of course, I draw my experience strongly from JERICS development, but not only. And then I think it is important to realize what happened in the last 15 years in order to be able to shape the next 15 years. And I think it is very clear that climate services were mainly formed for adaptation or adapting to climatic changes or the impact of climate change. And I do think in the next 15 years, we have to go from adaptation to climate change to climate resilient development. And I would even go further, and that's the lower title here. And I think that is what we have to do. I think we have to push our knowledge about climate services, weather services, modeling, and what we heard in order to be able to adapt to a sustainable lifestyle. Some people call it Paris lifestyle, 1.5 degree lifestyle. So I will go to this a little bit. So what happened in the last 15 years and what's still ongoing? Unfortunately, emissions are still rising. You know this, atmosphere CO2 emissions, but also methane. We also know from very interesting literature study that we have already put 10% of the people outside the human climate niche. And what does it mean? This means that if it's too cold, you die, or we die, and if it's too warm, we also die. We might have a heating system and a cooling system, but not everyone has this. And already now, about 10%, more than 800 million people have pushed outside their human climate niche, and they go somewhere else. If we continue emitting as we do at the moment, then by the end of the century, we might be around plus 2.7 degree global warming compared to pre-industrial times, maybe more, maybe a little less. And we might have pushed 20 to 40% of the global population outside the niche where they can live. They go somewhere else. If we would be able to reduce global warming to about 1.5%, only 1/5 of the increase would start, and we would only have 4 to 8% more being pushed out of their niche where they can live. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because we cannot only look at adapting to the weather changes. We have to see what's ongoing. So now let's step back into 2009, when GERIX has been founded as a climate service center, National Climate Service for Germany. We started with 5 fundamental principles. We always wanted to work with the current state of knowledge, and we see how the current state of knowledge is pushing forward. We just saw it from Copernicus, but also from Destination Earth and all the great efforts which have been made from weather services worldwide, and of course the scientific community. The second fundamental principle is that practical applicability. Climate services have to be applicable. They cannot be theoretically, and then the practice shows the nice method, the nice idea how we come from A to B is not doable. The tailored solutions, we have heard about the tailored solutions when we saw the presentations by Paco and by Carlos, by the 2 Carlos, about the tailoring towards the local needs. So that's one of the fundamental principles. And we need a combined view of mitigation and adaptation, especially complicated when it comes to cities. And of course, a fully holistic approach. So these are the 5 principles, guiding principles in GERIX. And I would say they are not only in GERIX. We hear a lot, and a lot of progress has been made here. So in 2014, IPCC AR5 Working Group 2 said already adaptation is place and context specific, with no single approach for reducing risk appropriate across all settings with high confidence. Approximately at the same time, 15, the European Roadmap for Climate Services has been launched and clearly stated the connection to users and the dialogue with users is needed. At the same time, in 2015, the Climate Service Journal was initiated, an open access publisher as Elsevier, and Jaro just already mentioned the Climate Service Journal. This is a journal for both scientists and practitioners should not be worried to look into this journal because they do not have to read the entire scientific articles, but most of them are very, very interested in case studies and good practices. But they can also look into the practical implication. No single article will be published without a clear statement and a summary what the findings of this article means for practical implications. I think this is very important, and I'm very glad to see that in the last years, this journal has made tremendous progress. Where are we today? Today we have climate services, public and private. We heard a lot about the extension of meteorological services. That is more or less a cultural background of meteorology, hydrology, delivery of data. And from the GERICS experience, we see, yes, this is a major fundamental basis, but it is not the entire story. We also see that we have public climate service centers. We have services sitting at universities, multidisciplinary academic, but also multidisciplinary business services. So Boston Consulting, others, Google, they all provide so-called climate services of very different kind. And it's important to understand for what the purpose is of their own services. We already saw that today we have advanced the data figure and guidance part of the climate service products. I don't go into detail here, but we have not advanced so much in the sectorial and spatial coverage. We understood that the non-uniformness is key, the non-seamless approach is important, and fit for purpose, instead one size fits all. That's what we have learned, and GERICS, I think, could see this in many different applications. We work very closely with stakeholders, but also with the science community networks. I'm very glad to see that the market is developing, and I'm also glad to see that there's guidance on the quality of market products. So the level of interaction is important to understand before and whenever you deal with climate services of whatever kind, and no matter which provider you give them. It is the question, is it an information like Paco and Carlo Buontempo just said? They told you, where are we with Destination Earth? They give an information, so it's hear us. Is it a consultation effort? Is it kind of user survey in where we would like to understand, and that's what the other Carlo was referring to, we have to understand the local needs, the local risk, the vulnerabilities, and that we can only see if we get into dialogue with individuals. So when we then reach the next part of engagement, it's the speak with us. So the dialogue, that's what you're doing there. And I'm very glad to see that, the crowd is a mixed crowd with users and providers. And then the partnership starts. And the partnership is, how do we jointly develop the service so that it is also used, and the trust which is needed in order to use it. And that's what you do. Here's one of those Climate Europe festivals ideas. I think it's great. When it comes to GERIC's co-creation of climate products, and we follow from the beginning quite of now complicated development for climate service products, which you see here. It is this kind of this wave pattern in which we try to connect the practice knowledge, the knowledge of the practitioners with the scientific knowledge in transdisciplinary processes, evaluation processes, to develop prototypes of climate service products. And that's important. It is important to develop prototypes first, test them, change them, and make them fit to the purpose in a way that it is really usable. And that is a prerequisite for being used. And Jaro, you referred to those words when you're in your opening here. So the introduction of quality standards for climate services and the process and ex post evaluation is important, and that is still a bit lacking to my opinion. So let's come, before I close, to some future needs, which I think are important, and what I consider as lessons learned in GERICS and beyond. So we do need more and faster connection to innovation. We are still a little bit on the side of administrative, avoiding harm, avoiding risk and vulnerability. That's important, don't get me wrong. But I do think if we could pick up a little bit the innovative character of climate services towards a more climate resilient development, which means tackling adaptation to climatic changes and mitigation of climate change in one go, in innovative new startup ideas, new ways how we live together and work in a resource efficient and resource not so resources demanding way. I do also think we need a stronger systemic approach. We are still looking into sectoral approaches, which is understandable. We just heard from the WMO, from the health report, which is very nice and very great, and it stretches through water, energy, agriculture. But we also need the systemic approach, and the system is then mirroring our life, cross-sectoral, cross-disciplines. We heard from Paco, and we are here in this nice EU-funded endeavor about the quality assurance, liability clarification, standards, norms. For me, it is important that we come up with guiding principles, that we are not putting barriers to the developments, but that we guide the development in a trust and solid and innovative basis, so that we can build our new, I would say, sustainable economy on these trust and these principles. We do need, and we just heard it in the talk before, we need more worldwide education and capacity development in not only in picking up and developing own climate services, but also in building up the experience and the capacity to implement in the frame of national adaptation and mitigation plans what we know about the needs for the future. And of course, and we are only partly good at this, I would say, that's at least what we have learned, is we have to tailor our communication strategies to the specific targeted audience. It's a very different communication strategy to the public or to civil society than to the CEO of specific private companies, for example. And with this, I would like to finalize more or less with a view into 2029. So in 15 years, I'm pretty sure we will have globally available kilometer scale atmosphere information on climatic changes. They may be in a way usable, that they are equally usable in all parts of the continent. And this is where I see where the piloting of Destination Earth, what we just discussed before, is heading to. And you might have heard from the EVE initiative, which is an international federation of Center of Excellences to empower all people to respond to the immense and urgent challenges posed by climate change. And this is both. It is empowering innovation economy to live in a mitigation of climate change, in a still economically wealth and welfare, but it is also adaptation. And for this, we do need those data engines, as we have seen, and Paco and Caro have talked about the connection between C3S and Destination Earth, which I see as pilots of the European hub or European pilot, which is probably the prototype of what might happen on other continents within this Earth visualization engine idea, this EVE idea. And I'm pretty sure that with the full power of CMIP, Codex, the local weather services, the global activities, we will end up in a world where we can, latest in 10, maybe earlier, and hopefully not in 15 years from now, work with a lot of AI on the data, which is then developed by those engines, the data which is connected from observations, so connecting observed data, scenario data, bring those data together with the non-climatic data, It could be demographic, could be economic, could be local risk data, could be city planning data. Put all this in, have all this in a virtual Earth cloud, and have a kind of a machine learning, AI-informed tool, so that I would say everyone could benefit from this information.
We need to move on.
I'm done. I'm done here. My last slide, Yarrow, that's favoring you. Okay. So this is the handover, the handover of the journal. You mentioned the editor-in-chief. I'm stepping down with this endeavor here, and I'm handing over to you, Yarrow. And I do think that whatever is being published in the future on climate services should end up in the Climate Service Journal. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Daniela, both for your talk and for your excellent service to the community. You have really shaped the community of climate services over the past 15 years, and I'm sure you will still do that for the next 15 years. So thank you very much for your thoughts, and thank you very much for everything that you have done in this area and many others. I would like to turn now to Asun. Asun is the third panelist who is with us here. One, two. Okay, now it works. Asun Sinclair is climate change lead at the DNV group in Norway and internationally, but she's also a leading scientist at the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, the Department of Sciences. And she's also one of the key members of the Climate Europe team. And I think Asun is going to give us a set of insight from the Climate Europe 2, the screening, what we have learned, the 10 key insights from the climate services. Asun, the floor is to you.
Thank you very much. Well, you must be exhausted. This has been quite a lot, but just hang in there 5 more minutes, because what we want to explain you now, if this works. Yeah. All right. So, as you have seen from the beginning and from all the presentations, climate services are hugely complicated, but they are not really properly regulated. And Europe really wants to work towards standardizing climate services, and is doing a lot of activities in this regard with the standardization organizations, but also has Climate Europe 2 as one of the mechanisms to help them figure out what those standards should be and how can we do this and move forward. Paco has already presented the 3 main objectives, and you have seen today how absolutely advanced the knowledge is, but we also need to take care of the world, which I'm very glad my female colleagues in the panel have reminded us that the real world is out there. So we need to understand the business models, we need to understand the market, the policy support, we need to engage with the community. And in the past 16 months, 17 months, we have learned quite a lot. So we have learned that definitely standardizing climate services is important, not only for adaptation, but also for mitigation, for the interactions between those two, and for the huge amount of work and interest and money that is going into declaring sustainable finance and reporting climate risk, which other regulations coming into place very fast and very quickly, and companies having to respond to this. So this standardization is going to be key in order to ensure this is robust and that this is fit for purpose. We have also understood, as you have seen today, and as you know in your work, that climate services are very, very complicated. And that we cannot stay only on the climate information side, but that we need to be able to see the full value chain. And you have probably seen today multiple versions of how to interpret that value chain. In Climate Europe, we have chosen to divide climate services into 4 main components. That doesn't mean that they are disconnected pieces, but just an analytical way to look at them, starting with the decision context, because the tools are fantastic, the models are fantastic, but if we don't understand what they are for, they will be not used and they will not be used properly. We also need to engage and understand what is the wider ecosystem of actors. We need to understand the different knowledge systems, not only the climate data and the models, but also the knowledge systems and the cultural traits and the sources of information that experienced farmers, for example, may have. And some of my colleagues have already mentioned that we need to properly understand the delivery mode and evaluate the overarching process. So we take those 4 components and their interrelations as a way to allow us to then understand how can we benchmark climate services. And this is stuff again. There we are. All right. So how are we going to do this? Well, it's very clear, and this consortium has shown that climate services can be and should probably be governed through both standardization processes that are much more formal, related to formal organizations, but we are also going to have to be very creative and look at alternative governance mechanisms that are not necessarily principles in a document or built up by consensus only with a group of people. So that is also going to be a big piece of work where we need to learn from you. We don't have a full set of requirements, but we have learned from literature, from experience, from harvesting, from existing projects and lessons learned that climate services shall demonstrate to be user-focused, science-based, transparent, collaborative, timely, accessible, sustainable, and equitable. And that is a handful. And eventually we need to sort of be able to create this into concrete specifications. This means, and I think this has been very clear in this opening session of the Climate Europe 2 Festival, that we need a multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary approach. We need multiple competences, and all these multiple competences need to work together and need to work together in an equal basis, in dialogue, but also with the same voice. And we need to be able to listen to everyone, including those that have specific knowledge of those decision contexts. We also all know, and again has been done already clear, that there is quite a lot of areas where there is existing important guidance in WMO, in Copernicus, in many meta offices. The climate information, the climate data part is the one that is best organized and is the one that already has available guidance. But this is not enough to standardize and to govern climate services. And I think Veronica Grasso herself has already referred to 2 key issues. We lack more understanding of the users, both private and public, and we also need to understand delivery and evaluation. Now, what we have also learned, and we have 2 work packages that are really looking into this, is that the climate services market is growing, that it has been until now very dominated, perhaps remains dominated by the public actors that offer the services, but there is a myriad of private climate services providers that are emerging, and we really need to understand what they do and what they need, and to learn from them, but at the same time being able to guide them going forward to create a benchmark and to ensure that those services are fit for purpose. And this means that we need to be able to broaden the engagement. We need to be very creative and understand how to reach out to different audiences. We are going to have to need different engagement strategies, for example, sectoral towards the private sector, but perhaps more using the arts, as you will see here today in the next days, in order to reach communities or even citizens. And we need to ensure that these engagement activities really help us learning what are the drivers of uptake and what are the challenges. And lastly, we want equity at the center. And this is a normative statement. Europe would like to see this or should, but it's also instrumental, because if climate services are not the result of full participation, the uptake is not going to be possible. We all really accept things that we are part of creating. So there is intrinsic and there is instrumental reasons for that. So this is where we are. We are a very large group of people from different parts of Europe, from different backgrounds, working towards this. We still have 3 years to go, but we need really to learn from you. We are so grateful to see you here, all of you, because you need to help us understanding these criteria. We need to learn from you also online. So please just come and join our network and let's work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all three panelists, Veronica, Daniela, and Asunal. So the incredibly rich messages as well. I need to apologize to all panelists now because I did a terrible job. We are a little bit running over the time and we have a tight schedule. So we really need to move on. And I know that there are some messages about the marketplace. I would keep it for the period after the lunch. But the insight that Asun was presenting will be a red line throughout this festival. So we will be talking about those, elaborating more in depth, and eventually on Wednesday, there will be a full participatory session on talking about those and gathering your own insight. So keep your question for later on, or use them, or express them during the World Cafe or later. Veronica, thank you very much. I think I just wanted to highlight that this is a community of climate service users and providers. And if there is any way that we can, the Climate Europe 2 can help you with providing some input into your global state of climate services, I think this group will be very happy to do so. And we are definitely looking forward to working with you and hearing about the next update. And Daniela, we really look forward to meeting you in person next time. We were hoping to you to be with us here and engage in this incredibly rich and diverse community of users. And we have learned a lot from your views and retrospective, as well as from your vision into the future that will be further elaborated in the next session. So thank you very much, all speakers. And thank you, the audience, the online audience. I would say we move on. There's a lunch set. My colleagues will show you how to get there. It's roughly the same place where we had the coffee break. And I would kindly ask you to be back at 2 o'clock because we have, again, a tight schedule, but especially also other online speakers. So with that, thank you very much and enjoy the lunch.
Thank you very much. Have a successful festival continuation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you also from my side, and all the best for the next days. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.